I spoke to Chris Whipple today, who wrote the book on you guys, The Gatekeepers, his book about White House chiefs of staff. I asked him where he sees you in the history of this job, and he said, at the very top. It looks like a three-way tie of sorts for him between you and Leon Panetta, chief of staff to Bill Clinton, and Jim Baker, chief of staff to Ronald Reagan. That accomplishment list that you rattled off today, everyone in the White House tells me it would be a shorter list if Ron Klain wasn't managing the team.
Well, that's very generous and also very untrue. Look, I think the advantage I have as chief of staff is I have a remarkable staff here at the White House. First of all, it's the most diverse staff in history. It's the first time ever a majority of the White House staff is female. I think that's a big advantage for us. We have people of color represented, consistent with their representation of the population. It's a staff that brings together diversity of experiences as well as racial and gender diversity. And I think, and it's also, I will say, perhaps the oldest White House staff in history, the most experienced White House staff in history. At the top levels of the White House, it's not just I that have been with Joe Biden for 36 years, but you've got Mike Donilon, who started the same time I did, and Anita Dunn, who's been with him for more than 20 years, and Jen O'Malley Dillon, who just ran the most successful presidential campaign in American history, and Steve Ricchetti, who's been with him for more than 2 decades, and Bruce Reed, who also has been with him for more than 2 decades. So you've got a very, very experienced, very diverse team. And I think that team brings a lot of strength here. And especially what it brings is the patience and perseverance to not get roiled when things go poorly, but to keep at it and keep at it. Look, I'm proud of what we did in these 2 years, but it's clear we've also had some rough moments in these 2 years. And we got to the finish line on all these accomplishments because we stuck with it, even when things were going poorly, even when people were counting us out, even when people said you'll never get it done. And I think the diversity, the maturity, the experience of the team, that's really what shows here.
I spoke to someone else in the White House today who has worked with more White House chiefs of staff than anyone except possibly you, going all the way back to the Clinton administration. And I was told that the assessment from that person is Ron Klain is the very best for many, many reasons, including this 36-year relationship with the president, which is unprecedented in this job and, as far as I know, in politics and government. That you could have started with Senator Biden 36 years ago and come to this point allows you a space with him that everyone agrees no one else has. And they talk about you in terms of being irreplaceable, but we're going to see you replaced.
Yes.
What are you expecting?
Look, I think that Jeff Zients is going to do a superb job. He has not as long as mine, but also a long-standing relationship with the president. And what he has is what every chief of staff needs, which is the determination to tell the president the bad news, to tell the president what he doesn't want to hear, to stand by his advice and recommendations, and most importantly, to work in a collaborative way with the team. You know, virtually every important decision we made at the White House, I'd put to a vote of the senior team. And I lost a lot of those votes, and we did what the team recommended, not what I recommended. I have a lot of confidence in the people here, their judgment, and those people will now be reporting to Jeff.
We, talking today, earlier today, in your office with your family there in the office, had some fun with them. You were taking me through some of the photographs in your office. And looking at one of those photographs, when you were telling Al Gore that the Supreme Court has basically ruled against him and he will not be elected president of the United States, I asked you if that was the worst moment of your career. Let's take a look at that. Was that the single most difficult moment in your public service?
No, it was a very difficult moment, but I think the single hardest moment for me was August of last year when we were down in the Situation Room and we learned that 13 Americans had died in Afghanistan, and learned that in real time. You know, at first we got the word that there had been a bombing outside of Abbey Gate at the airport in Kabul, and at first it seemed like maybe there wouldn't be casualties, and then there were a few casualties, and then the reports kept getting worse and worse and worse. It was just a horrible morning.
Were you the one who had to tell the president?
No, I mean, we were all together in the Situation Room watching this tragic scene unfold in Kabul, getting the news in real time from our commanders on the ground about the casualty count. And that casualty count went up with each update. And it was just clearly our saddest day, our hardest day, our most horrific day. Look, but I think it's also important for people to remember that we did airlift 180,000 people out of Kabul, and the largest airlift this country ever achieved. There are 180,000 people who have new lives because of the heroism and the courage of the men and women who flew those planes, who protected those gates, who guarded that airport, who loaded those planes. That entire multi-thousand-person unit in Kabul really changed and saved 180,000 lives. And look, I know we've been criticized for the president's policy decision there, but we ended America's longest war. Lawrence, 2022, the year we just finished, is the first year this century where no American died in combat in Afghanistan, okay? So it was time for that war to end. It's always hard to end a war. Those 13 brave people who lost their lives, the others who were injured at the Abbey Gate in Kabul, that is a horrible, horrible price to pay. But I do think that the evacuation was, a tremendous humanitarian achievement for the many lives that were saved. And I think ending the war in Afghanistan was the right decision.
The earliest photograph I have found of you is 1968. Yeah. You're with your parents, and you are meeting, apparently, possibly, I guess for the first time, and probably only time, presidential candidate at the time, Senator Robert Kennedy.
Yeah.
What is that little boy in the turtleneck in that photograph thinking about he wants to be when he grows up?
So it's an incredible story. I tell advanced people at the White House all the time that when you pick a place to hold a presidential event, you are changing people's lives. And that was this case in '68. My father owned a small business, a plumbing supply house in Indianapolis, Indiana. We weren't involved in politics. My father never finished college. He took over the family business. Some advanced person decided that when Robert F. Kennedy was going to do an event about small business, they'd do it at my dad's plumbing supply house. Completely random chance. And I met Bobby Kennedy that day. And I was impressed by the whole aura of the whole thing and so on and so forth. But what really got me excited and interested in politics was about a month after I met him was the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated. Senator Kennedy came to Indianapolis and spoke that night and told the crowd, we gave that incredible speech, a lot of which is carved on his grave not far from here in Arlington, about healing and about our need to eschew violence and come together and so on and so forth. And all over the country that night when Martin Luther King was killed, the cities burned. But we had no destruction in Indianapolis that night. There's a memorial to where he gave that speech in Indianapolis to nonviolence. And my father's business was downtown. If all the businesses in Indianapolis had burned, my father's business would have burned. And the idea that one person could deliver a message so powerful that it changed the history of a city, that it changed people's minds and hearts, that to me was really what compelled me to go into politics. Senator Kennedy's example, his passion, his devotion to civil rights, his devotion to nonviolent change, that really inspired me as a young kid. That's what got me into politics.
So, and then Bobby Kennedy was assassinated on the campaign trail about 6 weeks after Martin Luther King. And so there you are as a little boy thinking about politics for the very first time, and politics broke your heart.
It was obviously horrific and tragic to see Senator Kennedy killed after winning the California primary, and just a horrible, horrible night. But I think like a lot of people, I was a little young, but a little older than me, his passion and his devotion to social change, his determination to bring people together, black people and white people, rural people and urban people, and try to unite this country and bring this country forward. I just think that's still a role model for us today. It's something I think about all the time when we do our work here at this White House.